I collect love stories, real ones, the kind that change you. And this one started with an accidental touch under a table at Le Bernardin that made a billionaire forget how to breathe. He leaned in close, voice rough, and asked me something I still feel in my chest. Accident or invitation, Principessa? I didn't answer right away. But what happened next? Let's just say some invitations you can't take back. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who's here for this ride. You know that moment when your whole life splits into before and after? Mine happened on a Tuesday, which feels almost insulting for something that derailed everything. I was 28, working as a sommelier at Oriole in Manhattan. Good job. Great job, actually. I'd worked my ass off to get there. Scholarships, double shifts, tasting everything I could afford and plenty I couldn't. Wine was my language, the only one that ever made complete sense. That night, the reservation book showed a party of 4 at table 7, high profile. Marcus Chen, some tech investor everyone was talking about. His guest list included 2 executives I didn't recognize and Alessandro Vitale. I knew the name, everyone did. Real estate empire, hotels across 3 continents. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because it owned half the skyline already. 34 years old, never married, Italian father, American mother. That's all I knew walking in. What I didn't know was how he'd look at me. Our sommelier captain, Bernard, was handling the table personally. But 15 minutes in, Mr. Chen ordered a Chateau Margaux 2005 to pair with halibut. Bernard's face did that thing, that microscopic flinch only other wine people catch. Wrong choice, completely wrong. The tannins would overpower the fish, make everything taste metallic. But you don't correct a man dropping 4 figures on a bottle, except I couldn't watch it happen. Bernard saw me approaching and his eyes widened slightly. I gave him the look, trust me. He stepped back. "Mr. Chen," I said, voice warm, easy. "That's an incredible vintage, absolutely stunning. But if I could suggest something," I didn't wait for permission. "The 2010 Chassagne Montrachet from Domaine Ramonet, white burgundy. It'll make that halibut taste like it came from heaven's personal ocean. The Margaux deserves your steak course. Let it shine there." The table went quiet. Chen looked at me, then at the wine list, back at me. "You're certain?" I'd stake my reputation on it. He smiled, closed the list. Done. I felt someone stare, not casual observation, real attention, the kind that makes your skin hum. Alessandro Vitale was watching me like I'd just solved an equation he'd been working on for years. Dark hair, perfectly cut, sharp jaw, eyes so dark they looked black in the low light. Charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But it was how he held himself. Still, controlled, like everything around him moved at his tempo, whether it knew it or not. Our eyes met for maybe 3 seconds. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at me with this focused intensity that made my pulse do something inconvenient. Then I walked away because that's what professionals do. An hour later, Bernard found me at the service station. "Table 7 wants you." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "Vitale asked for you specifically." I checked my reflection in the polished wine fridge, smoothed my hair, told myself this was normal. It wasn't. When I reached the table, Chen was leaning back, satisfied. The executives were finishing dessert, and Alessandro was sitting there, wine glass in hand, watching me approach like he'd been waiting. "Gentlemen," I said, "I hope everything was—" "Perfect," Chen interrupted. "You saved my ass tonight. That pairing was incredible." "I'm glad you enjoyed it." Alessandro set his glass down, slowly. You knew he was about to make a mistake. It wasn't a question. I knew the wine wouldn't do what he wanted it to do. And you stepped in anyway. His voice was deep, measured, the kind of voice that doesn't need volume to command a room. Even though he's the client, even though you could have stayed quiet and collected your tip. I met his gaze. "Bad wine is bad business," He would have blamed the fish, the kitchen, maybe the restaurant, never the bottle. Someone had to fix it. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, something sharper. "What's your name?" "Harper Reed." He stood, tall, broader than the suit suggested. He extended his hand. When I took it, his grip was firm, warm. He held on a fraction longer than necessary. "Alessandro Vitale, but something tells me you already knew that." I might have glanced at the reservation. "Smart." He released my hand, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. "I'm hosting a private tasting next month. Rare vintages, small group. I need someone who knows what they're doing and isn't afraid to tell a room full of billionaires they're wrong." My heart kicked. That's a very specific job description. You just auditioned without knowing it. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a card, handed it to me. Heavy stock, embossed. Just his name and a phone number. "Call my assistant tomorrow. She'll arrange the details." I looked at the card, back at him. "And if I say no?" For the first time, he almost smiled. "You won't." Then he walked away, leaving me standing there holding his card like it might burn through my fingers. I should have known right then. Some invitations aren't requests. They're fate knocking. And I just opened the door. I didn't call the next day, or the day after that. The card sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days, practically glowing. I'd pick it up, set it down, pick it up again. My roommate Julia finally threw a dish towel at me. "Just call the man. You've been staring at that thing like it's a bomb." "It might be," I said. She laughed. "Harper, it's a wine tasting. You literally do this for a living." But it wasn't just a wine tasting. I could feel it. The way he'd looked at me, the way he'd said I wouldn't say no, like he could see something I was still trying to hide from myself. On day 4, I called. A woman answered on the first ring, professional, warm. "Mr. Vitale's office." "Hi, this is Harper Reed. He asked me to call about—" "Ms. Reed, yes. He's been expecting you. The tasting is Saturday, October 14th, 7 p.m., his residence in Tribeca. I'll send the address and details to your email. Business casual attire. And Ms. Reed?" She paused. "He doesn't usually follow up on these things personally. Consider yourself noted." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone. Noted. What the hell did that mean? Saturday came faster than I wanted. I changed outfits 4 times before settling on black cigarette pants, a silk blouse the color of champagne, and heels that made my legs look longer than they were. Professional, put together, not trying too hard. The address led me to a building in Tribeca that didn't advertise itself. No doorman's stand, no flashy entrance. Just understated elegance and a private elevator that required a key card the concierge handed me with a knowing smile. The elevator opened directly into his apartment. Not apartment, penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, exposed brick, dark wood floors, modern furniture that looked like art, everything precise, clean, expensive in that quiet way that doesn't scream. And there he was. Alessandro stood near the windows, talking to 2 men in suits. He saw me immediately, excused himself, walked over. He'd ditched the tie, white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, charcoal slacks, hair slightly less perfect than at the restaurant, like he'd run his hands through it. He looked good. Too good. "Harper." My name sounded different in his mouth. "You came. You didn't really give me a choice." He smiled, actually smiled. It changed his whole face. "No, I didn't." Before I could answer, he gestured toward the room. 8 guests, collectors, investors. A few of them think they know wine. Your job is to prove them wrong without making them feel stupid. Think you can handle that? Is this a test? Everything's a test. He leaned in slightly. I caught his scent, something cedar and citrus, subtle, expensive. "But I have a feeling you don't fail often." Then he stepped back, handed me a glass of champagne, Krug Grande Cuvée, to start. I took it. Our fingers brushed. He noticed. So did I. The tasting went exactly how I expected. The guests were smart, rich, and overconfident. I guided them through 6 wines, a Chablis, a Barolo, an aged Rioja, things most people never get to taste. I made it conversational, light, told stories about vineyards and vintages without lecturing. They ate it up. Alessandro watched from across the room, barely participated, just leaned against the counter with his own glass, eyes tracking me like I was the most interesting thing in the room. It should have made me nervous. It didn't. When the last guest left around 11, it was just us. The city glittered outside the windows. The apartment felt bigger, quieter. He poured 2 glasses of the Barolo, handed me one. "You were good tonight." "I know." He laughed, low, genuine. No false modesty. I like that. We stood there, not talking, just drinking wine worth more than my car. It should have felt awkward. It felt easy. "Why me?" I finally asked. He set his glass down, turned to face me fully. "You want the professional answer or the real one?" "Real." He stepped closer, not crowding, just closing distance. "Because you walked into that dining room and told a powerful man he was wrong without flinching. Because you care more about getting it right than being liked. And because when I shook your hand, you didn't let go first." My heart was doing that thing again. The inconvenient thing. That's observant. I pay attention to things I want. The air shifted. I should have left. Called a car, said thank you, and walked out like a professional. Instead, I said, "And what do you want, Alessandro?" He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled that almost smile. "I think you already know." And the terrifying part? I did. I left that night, but I didn't forget the way he'd looked at me when he said it. 3 days later, he texted, just a number I didn't recognize and 7 words. "Dinner Thursday, ci siamo, 8 o'clock. Not a question, an assumption. I stared at my phone during my lunch break, standing in the alley behind Oriole, where we took smoke breaks even though I didn't smoke. Julia would tell me to go. My mother would tell me to be careful. My gut told me this man was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with safety. I typed back, "That's not how invitations work." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "You're right. Harper, would you have dinner with me Thursday?" I smiled despite myself, typed, "Better, yes." His response came fast. "Good, wear something you feel powerful in." Strange request, but I understood it. Thursday, I chose a black wrap dress, simple, elegant, confident, heels that brought me closer to his height, hair down, loose waves, lipstick the color of wine. Ci siamo was in Manhattan, near Hudson Yards, trendy, Italian, the kind of place with a 3-month wait list. We were seated immediately at a corner table, half hidden from the rest of the restaurant. Alessandro was already there. Navy suit, no tie. He stood when I approached, kissed my cheek. European, casual, but his hand lingered briefly on my lower back as I sat down. Little touches. He was good at those. We ordered. He let me choose the wine, watching with that focused attention while I spoke with the sommelier. When the bottle came, a Brunello di Montalcino, he raised his glass. "To women who know what they want." I clinked my glass against his. "Do I?" "You do. You just don't always admit it." The food was incredible. We talked about wine, about New York, about nothing important. But underneath every word was something else, a current. He asked about my family. I told him my parents divorced when I was 12, that my mom worked 2 jobs to put me through college, that wine saved me when I didn't know what else to do with my life. He listened, really listened, not the polite nodding people do while waiting for their turn to talk. "And you?" I asked. "How does someone end up owning half of Manhattan before 35? He smiled. "My father built hotels in Italy, small ones, family-owned. I watched him work himself to exhaustion for something that barely broke even. When he died, I sold everything, came here, and rebuilt it the right way, bigger, smarter. That's cold. That's survival." He leaned back, studying me. You don't build empires by being sentimental. But you miss him. It wasn't a question. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. How do you know that? Because you built what he couldn't. That's not cold. That's love. He went quiet, set down his fork, looked at me like I'd just cracked something open he kept locked. You're dangerous, Harper Reed. Why? Because you see things. The waiter interrupted to clear plates. When he left, Alessandro reached across the table, took my hand. His thumb brushed across my knuckles. Slow, deliberate. I don't do this, he said. Do what? Dinners, conversations like this. I don't let people in. My pulse quickened. Then why am I here? He held my gaze. Because I can't seem to stay away from you. It was the first completely honest thing he'd said, raw, unguarded. I turned my hand over, laced my fingers through his. Good, I whispered. Because I don't want you to. He paid the check. We walked out into the October night, cool air carrying the smell of the city, exhaust and street food and possibility. Where are you parked? He asked. I took the subway. He frowned slightly. Let me drive you. Alessandro, I take the subway every day. Not tonight. He flagged down his car, a black Audi that appeared like magic. The driver got out, opened the back door. I should have argued. Instead, I slid in. He climbed in beside me, told the driver my address in Brooklyn. The partition went up. We were alone in the back seat, city lights sliding past the tinted windows. This is excessive, I said. I'm an excessive person. I'm noticing. He shifted closer. His knee touched mine. Does it bother you? I turned to face him. We were inches apart. I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his lips curved slightly like he was always 1 second from smiling or saying something devastating. No, I breathed. It doesn't. His hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek, tucking hair behind my ear. The touch was feather-light, but it sent heat straight through me. I want to kiss you, he said quietly. My heart slammed against my ribs. What's stopping you? Making sure you want it too. I leaned in, close enough that our lips almost touched. I want it. He closed the distance. His mouth was warm, firm, tasting like wine and something darker. The kiss started soft, testing, then deepened when I responded. His hand slid to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair. I gripped his jacket, pulling him closer. It wasn't gentle. It was want, weeks of tension breaking open. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against mine. This is going to complicate things, he murmured. I smiled against his lips. Good. We didn't define it, whatever this was. For 3 weeks, we existed in this strange space between professional and personal. He'd text me at odd hours, sometimes about wine, asking my opinion on an auction lot, sometimes just to say he was thinking about me. I'd respond too quickly, then hate myself for it. We had dinner twice more. Once at a small French place in the West Village where the owner knew him by name. Once at his penthouse where he cooked, which shocked me more than it should have. He made cacio e pepe. Simple, perfect. We ate on his couch with our feet up, sharing a bottle of Barolo, talking until 2 a.m. about everything and nothing. He kissed me goodnight at my door each time. Deep, slow kisses that left me shaking. But he never pushed for more, never invited himself up. It was driving me insane. Julia said he was being a gentleman. I said he was torturing me. Then came the gallery opening. He texted Tuesday afternoon. Event Saturday night, Soho, art collector I need to impress. Come with me. I stared at the message during my shift. This felt different, public, official. I typed back, as what, exactly? His response, as mine. My stomach flipped. I wore emerald green, silk, fitted, a dress that cost 2 paychecks but made me feel like I could walk into any room and own it. Hair pulled back, gold earrings, heels that made my legs endless. When Alessandro picked me up, he went still, just stood there in my doorway, looking at me like I'd knocked the air out of him. "You're staring," I said. He stepped closer, slid his hand around my waist, pulled me against him. "You're devastating." Then he kissed me. Hard, like he couldn't help himself. We were late to the gallery. The space was in Soho, all white walls and track lighting, contemporary art that probably cost more than my childhood home, people in designer everything, holding champagne, speaking in that low murmur rich people use. Alessandro kept his hand on my lower back the entire time, possessive, claiming. He introduced me to everyone, not as his date, as Harper, like my name alone explained everything. An older man with silver hair approached, wearing a suit that screamed old money. Alessandro's posture shifted, subtle, but I felt it. "Robert," Alessandro said smoothly. "Good to see you." Robert smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Alessandro, still buying up half the city, I see." "Someone has to." The tension was sharp enough to cut. Robert's gaze slid to me. "And who's this?" "Harper Reed," I said, extending my hand. "I'm a sommelier." He shook it limply. "How nice." The dismissal was clear. Alessandro's jaw tightened. "Harper curated the wine collection for the Meridian opening last month. Best reviewed tasting menu in Manhattan." Lie, but protective. Robert made a non-committal sound, then walked away. "Who was that?" I asked quietly. "Someone who thinks old money matters more than new success." Alessandro's hand pressed firmer against my back. "Ignore him." But I saw it. The flash of something raw in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or old hurt dressed up as indifference. We moved through the crowd. He was charming, confident, the perfect version of himself. But I could feel the tension radiating off him. Finally, I pulled him toward a quieter corner. "What was that about?" "Nothing. Robert's always been an asshole." "Alessandro." He looked at me. Really looked. Then sighed. His daughter and I were engaged 5 years ago. My stomach dropped. What happened? She decided marrying the son of a dead Italian hotel owner wasn't prestigious enough. Her father agreed. His voice was flat, controlled. She married a hedge fund manager 3 months later. Big wedding in the Hamptons. I wasn't invited. I didn't know what to say, so I did the only thing I could. I took his hand, laced our fingers together. "Her loss," I said simply. Something softened in his face. "You don't know me well enough to say that. I know enough." He pulled me closer, right there in the middle of the gallery. His hand came up, cupped my jaw. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Saying exactly what I need to hear." Then he kissed me. Not the careful, controlled kisses from before. This was different, desperate, like I was air and he'd been drowning. When we broke apart, people were staring. I didn't care. "Take me home," I whispered against his lips. His eyes darkened. "Harper, not my home. Yours." He searched my face. "You're sure?" I'd never been more sure of anything. We left without saying goodbye to anyone. His driver was waiting. The partition went up the second we got in. Alessandro pulled me onto his lap. I went willingly, straddling him, dress riding up. His hands found my thighs, slid higher. I gasped against his mouth. "I've wanted you since the moment you walked into that restaurant," he breathed. I gripped his shoulders. "Then stop being so patient." He laughed low and rough. "Patience is overrated." The drive to Tribeca lasted 7 minutes. It felt like 7 hours. When we finally stumbled into his penthouse, his jacket hit the floor. My heels followed. He backed me against the exposed brick wall, hands in my hair, mouth on my neck. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against my skin. I pulled him closer. "Don't you dare." I woke up in his bed, wrapped in sheets that probably cost more than my rent. Morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below us, distant and unreal. Alessandro was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching me with that intense focus he had. "You're doing it again," I murmured, voice still rough from sleep. "Doing what?" "Staring." His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "Can't help it. You're here, in my bed. I'm making sure it's real." I turned to face him fully. His hair was messy, jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked younger like this, less controlled. "It's real," I said. He leaned down, kissed me slow and deep, different from last night. Last night was urgency, need, years of wanting compressed into hours. This was softer, like we had time now. We stayed in bed until almost noon, talking, touching, existing in that perfect bubble where nothing else mattered. He told me about growing up in Tuscany, about his mother who taught English literature and loved American jazz. I told him about learning to identify wine by smell before I could legally drink it, about the first time I realized I had a gift for this. Eventually, hunger won. He made coffee. I stole one of his shirts. We sat at his kitchen island eating takeout croissants from some French bakery that probably required a reservation. "Stay today," he said, fingers laced through mine across the counter. "I have work tonight." "Call in sick," I laughed. "I can't just—" "You can. Stay." His thumb brushed across my knuckles. "Please." That "please" got me. The way he said it, quiet and honest, like he was asking for something he rarely asked for. I called Bernard, told him I had food poisoning. He didn't believe me but covered my shift anyway. We spent the day doing nothing, watched old movies on his massive TV. He taught me Italian phrases, laughing when I butchered the pronunciation. I taught him how to properly taste wine, which he pretended not to already know just to make me explain. Around sunset, we ended up back in bed. This time slower, deliberate. His hands mapped every inch of me like he was memorizing. When he whispered my name against my skin, it sounded like prayer. Afterward, tangled together, he said something that changed everything. "I don't want this to be casual." My heart stopped. "What do you want it to be?" He shifted, looked at me directly. "Real, exclusive, mine." "Possessive much?" "With you, yes." No apology in his voice. "I don't share Harper. I need to know if that's a problem." It should have been. The intensity, the certainty. We'd known each other barely 2 months, but lying there, his heartbeat steady under my palm, it didn't feel fast. It felt inevitable. "It's not a problem," I whispered. Relief flooded his face. He kissed me again, softer this time. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. The next 2 months were a blur of stolen moments and late nights. He'd show up at Oriole after my shifts, wait at the bar until I finished. We'd go to his place, mine, sometimes just drive around the city talking. He took me to the opera. I took him to a dive bar in Brooklyn where the wine came from a box, and he loved every second of it. We learned each other. The way he took his coffee, black, no sugar. The way I couldn't sleep without white noise. How he worked 14-hour days but always made time to call me. How I'd test new wines on him, watching his face to see if he liked them. It was perfect, until it wasn't. The cracks started small. A business dinner he couldn't get out of. Then another. A trip to Miami that got extended 3 days. I understood. His world was demanding. But I started noticing how he compartmentalized. Work Harper, personal Harper. Never the two together. I met his business associates exactly once after that gallery opening. Never his friends, never anyone who mattered. It started to itch. One night in early December, we were having dinner at his place. He was distracted, checking his phone constantly. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine, just work." "You've said that 4 times tonight." He set his phone down. "It is work, Harper. Big acquisition closing this week." "I'm not asking you to explain derivatives. I'm asking if you're okay." "I'm fine." But his jaw was tight, shoulders tense. He was shutting down. "Talk to me." I pushed. "There's nothing to talk about." "Alessandro?" "Drop it." Sharp, definitive. I set my fork down. Don't do that. Don't shut me out. I'm not shutting you out. I'm having a stressful week and don't feel like dissecting it. That's literally shutting me out. He stood abruptly. Not everything is a conversation, Harper. Sometimes things just are. The air went cold. I stood too. I'm not asking for everything, just something. Anything that makes me feel like I'm part of your actual life instead of just the part that happens after hours. His expression hardened. That's not fair. Isn't it? My voice cracked. I've been to your office exactly never. Met your friends 0 times. You know my entire life. My roommate, my coworkers, my favorite bodega guy. What do I know about yours? You know me. Do I? I grabbed my jacket, because right now it feels like I know the version you let me see. I walked out before he could answer. He didn't follow. He didn't call for 3 days. I told myself I didn't care, worked double shifts, deep cleaned my apartment, avoided Julia's worried looks. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. On day 4, flowers arrived at the restaurant. 24 white roses. The card said, "I'm sorry, let me explain, please." Bernard raised an eyebrow when he saw them. I stuffed the card in my apron. That night, Alessandro was waiting outside when my shift ended. Leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt, he looked like he hadn't slept. Harper, I kept walking. He followed. Please, just 5 minutes. I gave you 5 minutes 3 days ago. You wasted them. He caught my arm gently. I know, I panicked. I'm not good at this. At what? Basic communication? At letting people matter. That stopped me. He stepped closer, voice low. Everyone I've ever let in has either left or used me for what I could give them. My ex, her family, half the people I thought were friends. So I built walls, high ones. And then you walked into my life and started climbing them like they were nothing. My chest tightened. It scared me, he continued. You scare me. Because you're right. I do compartmentalize. I keep you separate because if I let you into everything and you leave, I don't know how I come back from that. I looked at him, really looked, saw the vulnerability he was trying to hide behind expensive clothes and controlled posture. I'm not them, I said quietly. I know. That's what terrifies me. We stood there on the sidewalk, December wind cutting through us, people passing by without noticing. So what now? I asked. He took my hand. Come with me this weekend. I have a meeting in the Hamptons, stay at the house, meet the people I work with, see that part of my life, all of it. Alessandro? I'm trying, Harper. I know I'm bad at this, but I'm trying. I should have made him work harder, should have held out longer, but the look in his eyes killed me. Okay, I whispered. Relief washed over his face. He pulled me into his arms right there on the street, held me like I might disappear. That weekend, his driver picked me up Friday afternoon. The house in the Hamptons was ridiculous. Oceanfront, modern glass and wood, the kind of place that appears in architectural magazines. Alessandro was on a call when I arrived, pacing the deck overlooking the water. He saw me through the windows, held up one finger. I watched him work, confident, commanding, completely in his element. It was attractive in a way that should have been illegal. When he finished, he came inside, kissed me like we'd been apart for weeks instead of hours. You came. I said I would. I wasn't sure you'd forgive me that easily. Who said I forgave you? I smiled. I'm just giving you a chance to earn it. He laughed, grabbed my hand, pulled me through the house, showed me everything. The guest rooms, the wine cellar that made me actually gasp, the master bedroom with views of the Atlantic. It's beautiful, I said. It's lonely. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, chin on my shoulder. Better with you here. That night, 3 of his business partners came for dinner. I wore navy silk, played the part, charmed them without trying. Talked wine, asked smart questions about their work, made them laugh. After they left, Alessandro cornered me in the kitchen. "You're incredible, you know that?" "I'm just being myself." "Exactly." He lifted me onto the counter, stepped between my legs. "They loved you. Marcus texted me asking where I'd been hiding you." "And what did you say?" "That you're not hidden. You're just mine." I pulled him closer, kissed him hard. We ended up in his bedroom, ocean sounds through open windows, moonlight on skin. He took his time, whispering Italian words I didn't understand but felt in every nerve. Afterward, tangled in expensive sheets, he traced patterns on my back. "I meant what I said," he murmured, "about wanting you in everything. I'm just learning how." I turned to face him. "Then teach me your world. Let me in. Not just the pretty parts, the messy parts too." He kissed my forehead. "Deal." Sunday morning, we walked the beach. Cold December sun, sand hard under our feet. He told me about the acquisition that had been stressing him. A hotel chain in Miami, complicated politics, investors pushing back. I listened, asked questions, didn't try to fix it, just let him talk. "You're good at this," he said eventually. "At what?" "Just being here, present. Most people want something from me, you just want me." "Is that so hard to believe?" He stopped walking, pulled me close. "Sometimes, yeah, but I'm starting to." We flew back Sunday night. He had meetings Monday, I had work. But something had shifted. He texted me updates throughout the day, called between meetings just to hear my voice. Tuesday, he took me to his office. 32nd floor, views of Manhattan, all glass and steel. Introduced me to his assistant Maria, who smiled knowingly. Showed me where he spent most of his life. "This is me," he said, standing by the windows. "The part you hadn't seen." I walked over, slid my arms around him. "Thank you for showing me." He held me tight. "Thank you for wanting to see it." What's it like when someone starts letting you in? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you're invested in where this is going. Part 712. Things were good. Better than good. January came with snow and late nights at his place. We fell into a rhythm. I'd finish my shifts, he'd wrap up meetings, and we'd meet somewhere in between. Sometimes his penthouse, sometimes my tiny Brooklyn apartment where he looked comically out of place on my thrift store couch. He started keeping a drawer at my place. I had a toothbrush at his, small things that felt enormous. One Friday night, he surprised me after work with plans. No details, just told me to pack a bag for the weekend and wear something comfortable. We drove upstate, 2 hours through snow-covered roads until we reached a cabin tucked into the Catskills, private, secluded, surrounded by winter-silent forest. "You rented a cabin?" I asked as we pulled up. "I own it. Bought it last year, barely use it." He grabbed our bags. Thought it was time to change that. Inside was all wood beams and stone fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the mountains. Cozy, warm, nothing like his sleek city aesthetic. "This is different for you," I said. He set down the bags, pulled me close. "My father had a place like this in Tuscany. Small, simple. He'd take me there when things got overwhelming. Said every man needs somewhere quiet to remember who he is." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in my chest. "Thank you for bringing me here." He kissed my forehead. "Thank you for being someone I want to bring." We spent the weekend like normal people, cooked together in the small kitchen, him teaching me how to make proper Italian risotto while I argued about his technique. Built a fire that took 3 tries because neither of us actually knew what we were doing, laughed until we cried when we finally got it going. Saturday night, snow falling heavy outside, we opened a bottle of Barolo from his cellar. Sat on the floor in front of the fire, his back against the couch, me between his legs, both wrapped in blankets. "I could get used to this," I murmured. His arms tightened around me. "Yeah? You, me, middle of nowhere, no one needing anything from us. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I love you. The words hung in the air. My heart stopped, started again, faster. I turned in his arms to face him. His expression was open, vulnerable, terrified. Say that again, I whispered. He cupped my face. I love you, Harper. I've known for weeks but couldn't figure out how to say it without sounding insane. Tears burned my eyes. Why would that be insane? Because it's fast. Because I've never said it to anyone and meant it. Because once I say it, I can't take it back. I kissed him, soft, slow, pouring everything I felt into it. When I pulled back, I said, I love you too, so much it scares me. Relief flooded his face. He kissed me again, deeper, hands sliding under my sweater. I shifted, straddled him, felt his sharp intake of breath. Harper, he murmured against my lips. Yeah? I need you. I pulled my sweater off. His eyes darkened, hands spanning my waist. You have me. We made love there on the floor, firelight dancing across skin, snow falling silent outside. He was gentle at first, reverent, like I might break. But when I whispered his name, begged for more, something in him unleashed. His hands everywhere, my back arching, the heat of him, the weight, the way he looked at me like I was everything. When we finally came apart together, he held me so tight I could barely breathe, face buried in my neck, whispering my name like prayer. Afterward, tangled together under blankets, his fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. That was different, he said quietly. Different how? Before tonight, this was incredible, but it was just physical. Now? He trailed off, struggled for words. Now it means something. You mean something. I turned to look at him. I always meant something. I know, but I wasn't letting myself feel it completely. I was holding back, protecting myself. His thumb brushed my cheek. I'm done protecting myself from you. Sunday morning, we stayed in bed until noon, talking, touching, existing in that perfect space where time didn't matter. He told me about wanting kids someday. I told him about my dream of opening my own wine bar. We mapped out futures that included each other without saying it explicitly. Driving back to the city Sunday evening, his hand on my thigh, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't just dating anymore. This was building something real and lasting and terrifying in the best way. Move in with me, he said suddenly. I looked at him. What? Move in? Your lease is up in March, right? Don't renew it. Move into the penthouse. Alessandro, that's fast. I know. But I hate the nights you're not there. I hate waking up alone. I hate having a drawer of your things instead of all your things. He glanced at me. I want you there. Permanently. My heart hammered. That's a big step. I'm aware. But I've never been more sure of anything. His hand tightened on my thigh. Say yes. I should have hesitated, should have thought it through, made lists, consulted Julia. Instead, I said, yes. His face broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen. And driving through the city lights, his hand in mine, I felt like we could take on anything. I had no idea what was coming. Part 812. Moving in together should have been simple. It wasn't. Julia helped me pack, shooting me looks the entire time. She asked if I was sure about this, moving in with someone I'd only known 6 months. I told her when you know, you know. She made me promise that if things went south, I wouldn't disappear. That I'd remember I had people who loved me outside of Alessandro Vitale. The move itself took 2 days. Alessandro cleared half his closet, reorganized his bathroom, made space like he'd been planning it for months. Watching him hang my dresses next to his suits felt surreal. Domestic, right. First morning, waking up there officially, I found him in the kitchen making espresso, still in pajama pants, hair messy, completely at ease. He handed me a cup, called me Principessa like always. I told him this was weird, but good weird. Like we were playing house except it was real. He pulled me close, kissed the top of my head, said it was real. I lived there now, with him. 3 weeks in, the shine started showing cracks. Not big ones, just small incompatibilities you don't notice until you're living together. He was obsessively neat. I left coffee cups around. He needed the apartment freezing to sleep. I needed warmth. He worked until midnight most nights. I went to bed at 10. We adjusted, compromised. But there was something else, something I couldn't name. He'd get phone calls and leave the room, receive texts that made his jaw tighten. When I asked, he'd brush it off. Always work, he'd say. I wanted to believe him. Then came the night that changed everything. I got home early from a rare short shift, found Alessandro on the couch, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking Italian, fast and angry. When he saw me, he switched to English, told whoever it was he'd call back, hung up, closed the laptop too quickly. I asked if everything was okay. He said fine, just dealing with something. I noticed he'd been speaking Italian. He said it was a business contact in Milan, then came over and kissed me, asked about my work. The deflection was smooth, practiced. I pushed, told him he'd been tense for days, taking calls at weird hours, barely sleeping. Asked what was really going on. His expression hardened. He had a lot on his plate, he said. I told him to let me help, to talk to me. He said there was nothing to talk about. And there it was again, that wall sliding back up. I reminded him he'd promised not to shut me out when things got hard. He said he wasn't shutting me out. He was handling his business. I asked why he couldn't tell me about this business he was handling. He exhaled sharply, said not everything required a conversation. Some things he needed to deal with alone. I felt my stomach drop. I asked why. I lived there now. His problems were my problems. He said that wasn't how it worked. I asked then how it did work, because from where I was standing, he only let me in when it was convenient. He said that wasn't fair. I asked if it wasn't. I'd moved my entire life there. I slept in his bed every night. I loved him, but his life didn't concern me. He ran his hands through his hair, said I was twisting his words. I told him to say the right ones then. We stood there in the middle of his pristine living room, the city glittering outside, everything perfect except us. He looked at me, something painful in his eyes. Then he said it. His ex-fiancée was back in New York. She'd been calling, wanted to meet. The floor tilted. I asked what he meant. He explained. Vanessa, Robert's daughter, the one he'd told me about. She'd reached out 2 weeks ago, said she made a mistake. Wanted to talk. 2 weeks. He'd kept this from me for 2 weeks. I asked why he didn't think to mention it. He said he didn't want to worry me over nothing. Nothing, I repeated. His ex who broke his heart wanted him back, and that was nothing? He started to say he didn't say she wanted him back, but his silence told me everything. I grabbed my jacket, he said my name, asked me to wait. I said no. I needed air, I needed to think. He asked me not to leave, said we should talk about this. I spun around. Now he wanted to talk after hiding it for 2 weeks? After I had to drag it out of him? I asked when he was planning to tell me. After he met with her? After he decided if she was worth going back to? He said that wasn't what this was. I asked then what it was. Because I'd asked him to let me in. I'd begged him. And he chose to handle this alone anyway. He said he was trying to protect me. I told him I didn't need protection. I needed honesty. My voice broke. I needed to know that when things got hard, he wouldn't disappear on me. He reached for me. I stepped back. I told him I was going to Julia's, that I needed space to figure out if we could actually do this. He said my name again, pleading. I asked if he loved me. He said I knew he did. I told him to prove it then. Stop protecting himself and fight for this. For us. I left before he could answer. Took the subway to Brooklyn, crying the whole way, wondering if loving someone meant accepting their broken parts, or demanding they fix them. I stayed at Julia's for 2 days. She didn't ask questions the first night, just handed me wine and her spare bedroom. The second night, I told her everything. She listened, nodded in the right places, then said something that surprised me. Your anger isn't about the ex, it's about him not trusting you enough to handle it. She was right. Day 3, I went back to work. Threw myself into service, into the familiar rhythm of opening bottles and reading tables. Bernard pulled me aside during a lull, asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. Alessandro texted constantly. I ignored most of them, until one came through around midnight that I couldn't ignore. It just said, I told her no. I chose you. I'll always choose you. I stared at that message for 20 minutes. Then I called a car back to Tribeca. He was still awake when I got there. Sitting in the dark living room, city lights the only illumination. He stood when I walked in, but didn't move toward me, like he was afraid I'd bolt. I set my bag down. We looked at each other across the space. I told him I got his text. He nodded, said it was true. He'd met Vanessa that afternoon at a coffee shop in Midtown. She'd spent an hour explaining how leaving him was the biggest mistake of her life, how her marriage fell apart, how she realized too late what she'd had. And what did you say? I asked. He took a step closer. Said he told her he was in love with someone else, someone who saw him, really saw him, not his money or his name or what he could do for her family, someone who called him out when he was being an idiot and didn't let him hide behind walls, someone who made him want to be better. My throat tightened. He said he told Vanessa that Harper Reed ruined him for anyone else, and he wouldn't have it any other way. I felt tears slip down my cheeks. He closed the distance between us then, cupped my face in his hands, wiped my tears with his thumbs. He said he was sorry for not telling me sooner, for thinking he needed to handle it alone. He'd spent his whole life believing people would leave, so he kept everyone at arm's length as protection. But I wasn't everyone, and he was done protecting himself from the best thing that ever happened to him. I asked if he meant that. He kissed me, soft, achingly gentle, pulled back just enough to look at me and said every word. I told him he was an idiot for not trusting me with this from the start. He smiled slightly, said he knew. Asked if I could forgive an idiot who loved me more than he knew how to express. I kissed him instead of answering, hard, desperate, weeks of tension breaking open. He lifted me, I wrapped my legs around his waist, and we made it as far as the couch before clothes started coming off. This wasn't the gentle lovemaking from the cabin. This was need, reassurance, claiming. His hands gripped my hips hard enough to bruise. I pulled his hair, bit his shoulder. When he finally pushed inside me, we both gasped, foreheads pressed together. He whispered my name like a prayer, told me he loved me between kisses, between thrusts, between ragged breaths. I told him back again and again until we both shattered. Afterward, tangled together on the couch, his fingers traced patterns on my bare back. He said we needed to figure out how to fight better, how to trust each other even when it was scary. I agreed, said we also needed to stop assuming the worst about each other's intentions. He kissed the top of my head. Deal. We stayed like that for a while. Then he carried me to bed, and we started over. Slower this time. Tender. Like we were learning each other all over again. The next few weeks were different, better. We actually talked when problems came up instead of shutting down. He showed me emails, included me in decisions about the business when it affected our time together. I made more effort to understand the pressure he was under. It wasn't perfect. We still argued, but we argued toward each other instead of away. One Sunday morning in late February, I woke up before him. Rare, since he was usually up at dawn. I watched him sleep, dark hair messy against white pillows, face relaxed in a way it never was when he was awake. This man had crashed into my life, turned everything sideways, and somehow become my entire world. It should have terrified me, it didn't. He opened his eyes, caught me staring, smiled sleepily and pulled me closer, asked what I was thinking. I told him I was thinking I wanted this. Us. Forever. Something shifted in his expression. He reached over to the nightstand, opened the drawer, pulled out a small black box. My heart stopped. He said he'd been carrying it around for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment, then decided the right moment was just whenever I was ready to hear it. He opened the box. A diamond caught the morning light. Simple, perfect, exactly what I would have chosen. He said my full name, asked if I would marry him, build a life with him, put up with his control issues and workaholic tendencies and occasional emotional unavailability in exchange for a lifetime of him trying to be worthy of me. I was crying before he finished. I said yes. He slid the ring on my finger, kissed me hard, then softer. We didn't leave bed for hours. Later, wrapped in sheets, engaged, planning a future I never saw coming, I realized something. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose broken parts fit with yours. And Alessandro Vitale, for all his walls and scars and complicated past, fit me perfectly. Part 10-12. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. Julia stood beside me as maid of honor, crying through her mascara. Marcus Chen was Alessandro's best man, which surprised me until I realized they'd become genuine friends over the years, not just business associates. My mom flew in from Ohio, met Alessandro for the first time 3 days before the wedding. I was terrified she'd think this was all too fast, too much. Instead, she pulled me aside after dinner and said she'd never seen me look at anyone the way I looked at him, like he was home. She was right. We got married at the Hamptons house, late September when the air was crisp but the sun was still warm. I wore champagne silk, simple and elegant. He wore navy, no tie, looking at me like I'd hung the moon. When the officiant asked if he took me as his wife, Alessandro didn't just say, "I do." He said, "I do," Principessa, in front of everyone. I laughed through tears. The reception was on the beach, barefoot dancing in the sand, wine flowing, string lights hanging between posts as the sun set over the Atlantic. At one point, Alessandro pulled me away from the crowd, led me down to the water's edge. He said he had something for me. I told him he'd already given me everything. He smiled and pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. It was a deed to a property in Soho. Small, brick building, perfect bones, currently empty. I looked at him, confused. He reminded me about my dream of opening my own wine bar, said he'd been sitting on this property for 2 years, waiting for the right purpose. Then he met me and realized what it was for. The space was mine if I wanted it. No strings, no expectations. Just him believing in my dream as much as I'd believed in him. I couldn't speak, just threw my arms around him, kissed him while our guests cheered from the beach behind us. We opened Harper's 8 months later. Intimate space, exposed brick, carefully curated wine list from regions most people had never heard of. It became the kind of place critics loved and locals treasured. Alessandro came every Friday night, sat at the bar, let me teach him about wines he pretended not to know. Julia worked there part-time, handling events. Bernard came by on his nights off, gave me advice I pretended to consider, but usually took. Life fell into rhythm. I ran the bar. Alessandro expanded his empire, but came home at reasonable hours now. We split time between the penthouse and the Hamptons house, talked about kids but weren't in a rush. One night, almost 2 years after the wedding, we were closing up Harper's together. Late November, cold enough that we could see our breath on the walk home. He was carrying my bag, I was stealing his warmth, tucked under his arm. I asked if he ever regretted it. The way we crashed into each other's lives so fast. He stopped walking, turned me to face him on the empty Soho street, said he'd spent his whole life building walls, protecting himself, measuring every risk. Then I walked into a restaurant and challenged a billionaire over wine, and everything he thought he knew about control went out the window. He said falling for me was the scariest, most reckless thing he'd ever done, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. I kissed him right there under the streetlights, long, slow, the kind of kiss that still made my toes curl after all this time. We walked home through the cold city, hands intertwined, talking about nothing important. When we got back to the penthouse, he made us tea. We curled up on the couch, city glittering below, everything quiet and perfect. He asked what I was thinking. I told him I was thinking about that first night at Oriole, how I'd had no idea that correcting a wine order would lead here, to this life, this love, this man who looked at me like I was the best thing that ever happened to him. He said I was, without question, without hesitation. I settled deeper into his arms, asked if he remembered what he'd said to me that night in the car, the question that started everything. He smiled against my hair, said of course, accident or invitation. I told him it was definitely an invitation. I just didn't know it yet. He kissed the top of my head, said he'd known from the start, the way I'd held his gaze, refused to look away first. He'd known right then I was going to change everything, and I had. We changed each other, broke down walls, built something better in their place, learned that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about choosing each other, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. Looking back now, years later, I can see it so clearly. How that one moment, that accidental touch under a table at Le Bernardin, set everything in motion. Alessandro leaned in close, asked if it was accident or invitation. I didn't answer right away, but every day since, I've been answering, with my whole heart. So that's the story. The love that changed everything. Rate it 1 to 10 in the comments. I'd love to know what you thought. And thank you for being here, for listening to this wild, beautiful journey with me.